Have you ever been home alone and suddenly had the feeling that you weren't really alone? Maybe it was a shadow that crossed your vision. Maybe it was a strange sound, a faint rustle, a vague movement that you convinced yourself was just the house breathing. But what if it wasn't? Today, we're exploring true horror stories that happened to people who seemed to be having a normal evening until things took a terrifying turn. So turn off the lights, lock the door, and stay until the end, because the final story might make you never want to be home alone again. Story 1. Liam's Window Breaker. I never thought a week alone in Lakewood would turn into such a nightmare. My dad and stepmom had just gone on their honeymoon, and I was overjoyed to be home alone. I'd set up my gaming rig in my brother's old room on the second floor. It was the perfect hideout, filled with nostalgic posters and dusty old action figures. It felt like my own private den. The first few days were perfect. I stayed up late, played video games, and ate whatever I wanted. But things changed on the third night. It was around midnight, and I was deep in a particularly intense game, the light from the screen casting strange shadows on the walls. Suddenly, I heard a slight scratching sound coming from outside. My initial thought was that it was just the wind or a tree branch brushing against the house, but the noise continued, growing louder and more persistent. I paused the game, my heart starting to race. The room was on the second floor. There shouldn't be any noise coming from outside. I tried to ignore it, turned up the volume, but the scratching grew louder. More deliberate curiosity and a creeping sense of dread drove me to investigate. I walked to the window, each step heavier with fear. I cracked the window open trying to listen, but the night outside was pitch black and silent, except for that incessant. Suddenly, a cold wind blew the window open wider, and before I could react, a dark figure began to crawl through the crack. My heart pounded in my chest. The silhouette was large, terrifying. Panic surged through me. I grabbed the nearest heavy object, my brother's old game console, and swung it at the intruder with all the strength I could muster. The shadow groaned in pain, slipping from my grasp and falling backward out the window. I quickly slammed the window shut, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I locked the door and stepped back, my mind racing. What if there were more? What if they came back? I grabbed the phone and called the police, my voice shaking as I recounted what had just happened. The wait for the police felt like an eternity. I stayed away from the window, every creak of the house startling me. When the police finally arrived, they found signs of an intruder in the bushes below the window, trampled leaves and broken branches, but the person was gone. They reassured me, promised to patrol the area and keep an eye out, but their words did nothing to calm me. Well, that night, I couldn't sleep. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound an imminent threat. I flicked on the light, my eyes darting toward the window at the slightest sound. The sense of being violated was overwhelming. This place, which had once felt like a sanctuary, was now filled with fear. I couldn't shake the image of that dark figure crawling through the window, turning my week of freedom into a waking nightmare. The solitude that had once been comforting now felt like a trap, every moment filled with the fear that the intruder might return. Story 2. The mysterious incident in Ian's shed. One rainy night in Central Islip became a nightmare I will never forget. My parents were out and I invited my friend Carl over. Carl texted saying he would be there in 2 minutes. I set up the game in the living room and waited, listening for the doorbell. Instead, I heard the back gate of the house creak open. Confused, I wondered why Carl was coming through the backyard. I grabbed an umbrella and headed out into the storm. The backyard was dimly lit by the house lights, casting strange shadows. The shed door was ajar, and the lights inside flickered. I called out to Carl, but no one answered. My phone buzzed with a text message, "I'm here." I looked back at the house and saw Carl standing at the front door, dry and confused. A chill ran down my spine. I went back into the shed where the lights were off. Fear gripped me as I cautiously stepped forward, but then I decided it was too risky. I ran inside, locking the door behind me. Carl stepped in, and we both stared out into the warehouse, worry etched on our faces. The police arrived quickly after my panicked call. They cautiously approached the warehouse, their flashlights piercing the darkness. When they opened the door, it was empty. The lights were back on, the door wide open like an ominous invitation. The officers found no signs of forced entry or anyone hiding. The unsettling feeling remained, the feeling that something or someone had been watching me from the shadows. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, even after the police left. The warehouse, once a simple storage space, had become a source of fear and mystery. Story 3. Chris's Call. I had a terrifying experience one night at our Evanston home. I was supposed to work late, but a last-minute change allowed me to get home early. My wife and kids had gone out to dinner, leaving me home alone. I headed straight for the basement, my man cave, filled with my favorite memorabilia and a big screen. I settled into the couch, the familiar sounds of my favorite show filling the room. But my peace was shattered by the sound of the basement window opening onto the backyard. I froze, my heart pounding. I looked over the edge of the couch and saw a faint figure peeking through the window. Panic rose within me. I ducked behind the couch, my mind racing. What should I do? The figure retreated, and I seized the moment. I grabbed the baseball bat. I kept for emergencies and crept upstairs, my footsteps silent on the carpet. In the kitchen, I turned off the lights, plunging the house into darkness. I waited, nerves on edge, near the back door. Suddenly, a hand slid through the pet door, fumbling for the lock. I swung the bat as hard as I could, hearing a sickening crack. The intruder screamed, jerked his hand away, and ran into the night. My heart pounded in my chest as I locked the door and called the police. The sirens came quickly, the lights flashing in the windows. One cop took my statement while another patrolled the area. That night, I learned that a neighbor 3 doors down had been murdered. The house had been ransacked, valuables stolen. The killer was still at large. The thought that I might have come face to face with the killer himself sent shivers down my spine. I lay awake all night, the baseball bat never leaving my side. The solitude that had once been comforting in my cave had now become a place of fear. Story 4. The attempted kidnapping of Anne. My name is Anne, and a snowy Friday night in our house in Boulder turned out to be the scariest experience of my life. My parents went out to dinner, and my sister went out with friends, leaving me alone. I enjoyed the quiet and decided to take a nap in bed. The soft glow of my nightlight cast a warm glow across the room, and I quickly fell asleep. I awoke to a loud noise. Drowsily, I sat up, listening intently. The sound came from my closet. My heart started to race, but I told myself it was nothing. It was just the house settling down. I stood up and opened the closet door. It was empty. I breathed a sigh of relief and turned around, only to freeze in fear. There, under the bed, was the head of a man, staring at me with an expressionless face. I screamed, but before I could run, another man emerged from the closet, grabbed me, and pulled me in. My screams were muffled as he covered my mouth with duct tape and tied my hands. They dragged me down the stairs, my feet barely touching the floor. I struggled, panic and fear rising inside me, but they were too strong. Outside, the world was still covered in snow, the streetlights casting strange shadows. They were heading for their car, intending to stuff me into the trunk. But as they reached the street, a group of teenagers on bicycles passed by. Their laughter turned to screams of alarm when they saw what was happening. Some of the kids got off their bikes, cautiously approaching, while others screamed for help. The men panicked, dropped me, and fled in their cars. The teenagers ran to me, helped me up, and called the police. My parents came home a few minutes later, finding me shaken but unharmed. The police took my statement, but the men were never found. I can't shake the horror of that night. The memory of the man's face under my bed haunts my dreams. The once peaceful snow is now a blanket of fear, a reminder of how quickly safety can be shattered. Story 5. Garver's Stalker. It was a stormy night in our Portland house that would haunt me to this day. I was used to being alone. My parents were out several nights a week, leaving me to work on my music in peace. The storm outside was raging, the wind howling and the rain lashing the windows. The steady rhythm of the rain was usually soothing, but tonight it felt different, more oppressive, more sinister. A loud bang on the window startled me. My heart pounded as I looked through the rain-splattered glass. There in the dark yard stood a figure, barely visible through the pouring rain. I pulled the curtains back, hoping the person would leave, but another loud bang on the window, followed by a voice calling, "Come outside. I want to show you something." Fear gripped me. I picked up the phone and called the police, my voice shaking as I explained the situation. They asked if I knew the man and if there was any immediate danger. As I spoke, I moved to the kitchen, hoping to get a better look. I was horrified to see the man standing at the kitchen window, staring in with an unsettling intensity. My voice shook as I urged the police to hurry. I looked at the man, feeling both scared and angry. Who was this man? What did he want? The rain continued to pour, the sound mixing with the pounding of my heart. I kept the police on the line, updating them as I moved from window to window, trying to keep the man in sight. Suddenly, the man disappeared. My heart skipped a beat. I looked out into the yard but saw no sign of the intruder. The police arrived a few minutes later, searching everywhere but finding no one. The police officer reassured me, but I was not relieved. The man disappeared into the night, leaving me feeling violated and scared. I spent the rest of the night checking the locks, looking out into the stormy darkness. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind made me jump. The once comforting solitude of the house now felt like a prison. The memory of the man's face at the window haunted. The storm still raged, like a mirror reflecting the chaos inside me as I waited for dawn to bring some semblance of safety again. I hope this message finds you. Know what to do in the event of an intruder. Garver's quick action in calling the police when he saw a stranger outside the window could have prevented a more serious incident. Keep your phone close and use it to call for help if needed. If you enjoyed this creepy story and want to hear more horror stories that will leave you breathless, give this video a like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. By liking and subscribing, you will never miss out on the latest horror stories and safety tips to stay alert. Your support helps us bring you more thrilling content and build our community of horror enthusiasts. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you'll be the first to know when a new video is released. Stay safe and stay scared.